Good afternoon, Jefferson City. My name is Steffi Smith, and I am the local government reporter for the Jefferson City News Tribune.
I'm Matthew McFarland, the Cole County government reporter for the News Tribune. We're here today to discuss the capital improvement sales tax, which will be on the ballot for Cole County residents on Tuesday. Joining us is Jefferson City Director of Public Works, Kyle Broomer, and Cole County Director of Public Works, Eric Landwehr. How are you guys today?
Great.
Doing great. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for joining us today. So, the county's version will be on the ballot on Tuesday, and Jefferson City voters will have a chance to vote for their own version of the tax in the fall. Could you guys maybe start by just giving us a breakdown of what the capital improvement sales tax is and what it funds here in Cole County and Jefferson City?
Well, I guess since ours is first on the ballot in April, I'd be happy to go first. So they have sent sales tax for capital improvements in Cole County. Jefferson City has the exact same setup, more or less. In Cole County, it's basically to fund improvements needed in our community. It funds improvements in the whole county. It includes Jefferson City and the 7 small communities. 85% of what's the funds raised through this program go to road and bridge improvements throughout the county. The other 15 goes to facility type improvements. And that could be, when I say facility, that's other departments. That could be improvements needed within their department, whether it's some vehicles, computers, other needed equipment that they use, or other building improvements as well. So you have the county courthouse, you have the county commission offices in that building, you have the Carnegie building, the jail and the sheriff's office, health department, EMS. You have all these other county departments that do have needs just like road and bridge. So in a nutshell, that's what that sales tax improvement program is for. Of the road and bridge, there's several different categories we can get into as we go today. But
For sure.
Several, just everything, every aspect of what we do, road and bridge related, is rolled into this sales tax, and that is what funds what improvements we make throughout the county.
And that's the sole source of funding for pavement projects in the county.
Generally for improvements.
Gotcha.
Now there is the property tax funding that we get, as well as gas tax funds, and there's some grants that come into through whatever source, but that primarily goes to just maintenance and operations, whereas the sales tax is really what drives the improvements that we do. So new bridges, pavement overlays, stormwater improvements, road upgrades from up to curb and gutter, Wildwood Drive type of project that we just finished last year. So yeah, if you see an improvement out in the county, it's funded through this program.
Gotcha. And Kyle, I know that the funding breakdown is a little bit more complex for the city, but could you maybe give us a general overview of what this funds in Jefferson City?
Yeah, sure. And August is when folks will vote on our tax. So we've got two votes going on, one in April, one in August, and in August for the city. On the public works side, about a little less than 60% goes to public works items. The other percentage goes to public safety, parks and recreations, some IT and some contingency items for the city. But on the public works side, about 25% goes to our overlay program, and that really funds our entire overlay surface maintenance program. So any roads that we do are funded directly out of this sales tax, as far as new asphalt, new pavement, new concrete.
Gotcha.
And then 20% goes to fund our joint projects with the county, and then we've got about 10% between sidewalks and stormwater, and then a little percentage goes to airport and transit for really for kind of grant matching items, so those two entities can go after federal dollars.
Right, and when you say grant matching, those are state or federal funds where you have to match the amount given in order to receive the grant. Gotcha. What percentage of that 85% from the capital improvement sales tax goes towards collaborative projects for the county?
So Kyle said about 20 of theirs. So our program, we raise more funds total, because it's the whole county. Percentage-wise of that goes to cooperative projects, a little bit less. It's roughly about 15-16%.
Gotcha. Excellent. Well, now that we've got a kind of a baseline, we'll go back and forth. Obviously, Steffi will be asking the city questions. I'll be asking the county questions, and of course, as is the nature with this tax, there'll be some collaborative questions as well. But Steffi, why don't you go ahead and start?
Yeah, first I think a lot of people want to know about the High Street Viaduct. It's pretty popular. thoroughfare that, as you guys know, closed earlier this year, and the city is planning to replace it and I believe repair it and open it temporarily before replacing it because it'll be pretty expensive. And so one resident wanted us to ask whether revenue from the city or the county's sales tax will go toward the High Street Viaduct.
So to answer that, both. We've both city and county have been collaborating jointly on kind of what the status is and where we're at and what the outlook looks like, who we've been communicating with, whether it be MoDOT or our federal partners, trying to drum up funds for that project. Really, I mean, it's the replacement has been under design, meaning it's probably at a 80 to 90% design level right now. But it's going to cost to replace the viaduct. It's going to cost anywhere between $16 to $18 million. So that is a huge chunk of money that just this joint tax, joint funds alone, it would really drain the amount of funding that we have. So we're looking at about $1.2 million per year is what our joint projects kind of equal.
Mm-hmm.
And so an 16, $18 million project that can really bleed us dry, and we'd love to be able to use those funds for projects that maybe aren't as grant eligible. We feel that the viaduct and its importance makes it a pretty grant eligible project. So we're pursuing state and federal help for that project.
Gotcha.
And that would be the build grant, correct? And it would also fund it would be a bridge from Lafayette Street to Deborah Cooper Park, correct?
So yes, so that is encumbered in that build project, and then we've also submitted a community projects grant at the federal level through our Mr. Anders' office. So we're hoping he's been great help to us so far, and actually last year we got $1 million to help support this project already. So we're hoping for more than that to come, but yes. So I don't know if you've got any questions on kind of the state of it now, but I can kind of go into we have obviously it's closed. We've got a project out to repair the hole that's in there now. There's a couple other weak spots that we want to repair. And then MoDOT and our engineer that we've had involved, local engineer Bartlett West, who's looked at that bridge multiple times, feel that it's appropriate to open back up once it's been patched. So once that's been done, we'll open it back up, and then hopefully some funding will come.
I know you guys have talked about, of course, with the collaborative projects, and at a recent meeting where you guys kind of broke down the future that I was at. You said that this would be jointly funded. The viaduct would be, number one priority and be jointly funded through Cole County and Jefferson City. What is that split going to be? And Eric, if you're talking to a rural voter, how do you kind of explain to them, right? What benefit are they getting out of, and using county funds on what ostensibly would be a city project?
So I'd kind of compare that to I've been in St. Louis and Kansas City recently, and I usually take I-70. Well, I don't live in those areas, but I drive those roads.
Sure.
I think not every, but most county citizens are going to drive a lot of the roads in and around Jefferson City daily, probably, if not weekly. And so, funding a transportation system, you don't just do it in your little area. You need to think broad picture. And so that's why the county's been a very equal partner to this project, because we understand the importance of that viaduct as a main connector from the downtown area to the west side of town. 1993, the flood of 93. I was working downtown at MoDOT at the time, and there was really no other way to get across town other than there, or taking Ellis Boulevard all the way south. And you can imagine the traffic nightmares that we had. So the county's invested in the project. It's important from just a regional standpoint. It's also important for people coming into Jefferson City working at the Capitol. daily that maybe don't even live here. And so that's why, even, we do here, we fund this system within our county and we take care of it. But we also are providing a system for other people that come in and out. And that's why the half-cent sales tax is important, because about 35% of what's raised through this comes from outside sources. Those people coming in daily to work, going to shop at the store, or for whatever reason they're spending their money here, and which goes to providing for taking care of the system that they use.
Right, sales tax covers obviously commuters, tourists, as well as locals. Any economic activity. Right,
Yes.
gotcha.
Yeah.
Is that split planned? Obviously, we don't have anything set in stone, and the grants are going to play out a big factor here. But are you planning to be 50-50 on the viaduct? What does that split look like so far?
It's so. As Kyle said, they're securing some some grant money through Representative Onder's office. They got some already. They've also, the city put in some of their ARPA funds into paying for the design, and so whatever is left that needs to be funded, that'll be split 50-50.
Gotcha.
So, and wherever we land when it's time to make that decision, if we get the grant, then it covers everything.
Sure.
And then we can take that money and put it into those other important projects that are on the project menu.
Gotcha. So it may end up being, Jefferson City may end up covering over 50% of the total project with grant funding, but say if you got $8 million in grant funding and $10 million left, it'd be $5 million.
Right.
Gotcha.
Exactly. Yes.
Makes sense.
Yeah, so as I understand, the only difference that is on the ballot this year would be that in years past, the capital improvement sales tax has been 5 years, and then this year it will be 10 years. I guess, can you guys kind of explain the reasoning behind extending the sunset? I know it has to do with bonding capacity and all that kind of fun stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I would comment a couple of items, and I'll let Eric chime in. But we covered earlier what does this tax cover for the city, and I mentioned our overlay program, concrete street repairs, stormwater repairs, sidewalk repairs. That's really taking care of the system that we already have. Items. I know those aren't the nice fun Wildwood type projects that are brand new, but there's a lot in our system that we've got to maintain, and so it's very, very important that we have those dollars to maintain what we already have, and the longevity of that is that with 10 years, that kind of secures us and being able to take those dollars, maybe find some grant funds like we talked about with the big project in the viaduct. But what it does, those projects take a long time to deliver. There's a lot of environmental and cultural items that we've got to work through, and those projects are taking longer and longer to get through the system, get through all those checkpoints, if you will, when it comes to grant funding.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and Kyle really summed it up pretty good. I'll just add a few things. I've been at the county I'm in my 21st year, and when I first came to the county, I was responsible for the capital improvements program as the county engineer. And projects generally maybe 2 years from the time you start design, maybe 3. There was just a shorter window. The complexity of the projects we did was not near what it is today. Today, and Kyle sees it on the city side, I see it on the county side. The types of projects that we do and the process you got to go through from start to finish can get into this 5-year window. I have a project right now. We started in 2019. I was still the county engineer when we started. We started it. We didn't really have all the funding at the time, so we went after a CDBG grant, got that, but that brought with it other administrative, hoops and things you had to jump through. Good or bad doesn't matter, just a process that you had to do. So, and then we had to acquire 60 easements. So it just takes a lot of time. 5 years is short, very short for planning purposes. And I'll end it with the fact that this current sales tax cycle, we wanted to do the viaduct. We don't have enough money.
Right. On a 5-year
window just isn't enough.
Right, you wouldn't generate enough money in a 5-year window to even be able to plan for that project.
There's just not enough money generated on a project of that magnitude. We hope we get grants, obviously, but if we don't, then
if we don't, we need loan, grant, bonding, whatever it is. It's difficult to do without the amount of dollars to add up.
Sure.
At a 10-year level, at 1.2, a clip, that's $12 million in 10 years from each, and now that security is there that a project like that can get a green light.
Right, especially a project like obviously the viaduct where you can't wait, right? Time is of the essence, right? Where you have to move forward on it.
Right.
How does this 10-year sunset? Obviously, a portion of the sales tax kicks into rural communities in Cole County for their own pavement needs. How does it change for them? Are they going to get a bigger proportion? Is it still going to be paid out in 5-year installments? What's it going to look like for the small communities?
So that's an excellent question. I don't know that anybody's asked me that specifically. I appreciate that. So we have a Road and Bridge Advisory Board similar to the city's Public Works and Planning Committee. Our board is made up by community members that we're happy that they serve. We that type of question, we've been presenting it to them to get their feedback on it. So in the current sales tax cycle, we have each community gets $100,000 in the 5-year period, and then there was also $1 million set aside for cooperative projects. And so and that is done on an application and approval type process. So what we've decided to do, we're essentially doubling that money for the 10-year. So it's about the same percentage-wise, but we don't want to do all our projects within the first 2 or 3, so we're going to break it up into 2 segments. So we'll do a 5-year and then another 5-year. It might not be exactly that. It might be we may wait till year 2 or so and do 2 or 3, but those items will be hashed out through the Road and Bridge Advisory Board, but most likely 2 different cycles.
Gotcha.
And then we're looking at maybe rearranging the formula on how. So again, everybody gets $100,000, and that's typically for pavement improvements in their small community, and then those other monies were for more, curb and gutter,
specialized
upgrades,
projects, right?
specialized sidewalks and whatnot. So, but each community's got a different population and a different amount of road miles, and they're not the same. And so we're looking at changing that formula a little bit to distribute a little more based on population and road miles.
Sure. So in essence, right, a town like Taos with more residents would get more of that funding because they have more roads than maybe Centertown, for example.
Yeah, and we see it. We see what their needs are because most of their overlay work they bid with us.
Gotcha.
And so we're usually putting together that with our package, and so we see where their needs are. And the smaller communities, in a 5-year period, they may be able to do all their roads, overlay them, whereas one of the larger communities with more miles can't. And so we need to make sure we're doing that a little better. That way the needs are all covered throughout the 7 small communities.
Gotcha. Awesome.
So you had mentioned that in the last sales tax cycle, there were some priority projects that ended up not getting funded, like the High Street Viaduct, due to a lack of available money. And then there was also the Monroe Street to a 2-way project and a leeway project on Stadium Boulevard that just didn't kind of end up reaching that milestone. Can you guys talk a little bit about why that happened and how I guess the city is planning to make sure that any priority projects do reach that end goal?
You want to handle that one?
So, how I would answer what we're looking at this year and what we've identified this year is, Eric and I have established a menu of projects, and of those projects, those are projects that I think that we can do. Obviously, with the viaduct, kind of set that off to the side just a little bit as far as funding goes. We want those grant funds to help that. But say we get those grant funds, then we've got a menu of projects that kind of the old Munichburg area, kind of Dunklin, Jefferson, Madison area, and then just in the downtown area, East High Street, Jackson, Marshall Street, we've identified, and looking at those 2 areas, along with another project, Edgewood and Stadium, projecting how much those will cost, and then does that live within the means that we have, right? And as costs elevate, it may, what we can do can decrease. but we think what we've identified is fundable, but we want to be flexible too, because if we do have a potential development or developers that come in, or grant funding, say a project is more grant eligible than the other, that we can say, hey, this makes sense to shift to another project.
Mm-hmm.
I think you got to be a little careful about being too rigid in what you promise, just because, as Kyle said, needs emerge in a 5-year window, a 10-year window that you didn't even plan or think of before you started this. So you need to have some flexibility. The Monroe Street, the 2-way or the 1-way, converting it to 2-way, that was a project that originally started as a full-blown, taking it from the expressway all the way to the hospital. And then the city council at the time decided that we don't want to take it that far. We just want to do the main area there to Dunklin, which was the highest priority at the time. And so they made that switch. Unfortunately, there was some design work that had already been done on the other piece, which is still good. If and when that project rises to the need, then it'll be ready. But yeah, I'll just give you an example. So back 10, 15 years ago or so, give or take, I lose track of the time. St. Mary's wanted to build a new hospital, and it was going to go out off of 179. Well, that was midstream in a sales tax cycle. We had no idea. Nobody knew that was even a possibility as we were developing plans for, the cycle we were going into. But there's flexibility in the plan that when those economic emerging needs arise, we got to be able to respond to it.
Right.
And we were able to there was some money that came from the state too to build the interchange, but the road connecting up there was a city-county cooperative project.
Gotcha. And so that 10-year cycle also lets you be a little bit more flexible. Gives you a wider time frame to act on changes, right? Gotcha.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Another thing, and a lot of things that we do and have been successful in this community is acquiring grants, and they're out there whether we get them or somebody else is going to get them if we don't. And so, ones that do apply, that, like Kyle is using that term, grant eligible, there's certain projects that are more applicable to get a grant than others.
Sure.
And when we can capitalize on those opportunities, it expands the reach of the sales tax program.
Sure.
It's not just limited to what is generated here. You can couple that money and go after more. The Capital Area Rail Terminal is a great example of that. There was more money through grants that pay for that project than this program.
Right. And you guys have said, previously, you can make the local dollars stretch further when you're kind of combining, especially for those matching grants. When you're talking about, piggybacking off of each other's bids and stuff like that, how do these collaborative projects help the dollars stretch further that way when you're, trying to find contractors for work?
In what way? As far as just combine?
Lowering costs and kind of combining bids, and like you've referenced piggybacking off of each other's bids in the past.
Cooperative procurement, things like that.
Yeah, yes. and maybe not specific to the joint projects, but going back to resurfacing projects. I know this week, Eric and I were talking about, hey, when is your resurfacing program? When's that being advertised? When you're bidding asphalt, and trying to make sure that we're matched up on timing. And so in doing that, if you're able to put more out there, hopefully because of volume, the price comes down.
Right. Gotcha.
So there's things like that we work on, and we are two different public works departments,
sure,
but we do operate a lot together. We share, not always share resources, but we share ideas and information, and we help each other out. So we got two different responsibilities, but we're acting as a kind of a combined, effort going forward.
Gotcha.
How do you know when a project is grant eligible? I guess what makes the High Street Viaduct kind of more grant eligible, I guess?
So, looking at the grants that are out there and trying to figure out how, what projects fit those grants. Some grants are more on the transportation alternative side, so from sidewalks to trails. So on Jackson Street, I mentioned Jackson Street as one of the priorities in downtown, that we've actually received a were awarded anyways a grant through MoDOT, and that grant was on transportation alternative side. So if we can fund the sidewalk elements, that could include some lighting and some curb potentially, anything revolving around that sidewalk, but then pair some street work with it and do that street work at the same time, then you get a more complete street after it's built than just a sidewalk next to a failing street, right? So,
bridges, for example, it's the federal program administered by MoDOT, but there's funding for cities and county bridges, and you have to apply for that money. It used to be it was the formula, you just got X number of dollars every year, and you had to save up money to build a big structure. They changed that formula in the current federal gas bill, or the federal transportation bill, and now made it to where you submit an application and you get awarded. Example, Tanner Bridge Road bridge over the Morrill River. That project, the $2.2 or so million cost for the bridge project, it's a joint project with some roadway work too that's paid separately through the program. But the bridge funds through MoDOT, the federal bridge funds, the county's spending about $70,000 or $80,000 on a $2.2 million project. The rest of that's coming through, other funds from MoDOT.
That's your state funding.
Grant, whether it's a grant or whether it's money that's allocated for the states and counties and cities, whatever you want to call it, grant program, whatever. It's other money that we're able to use the funding that we do have to leverage to get.
Gotcha.
I like that build grant that you mentioned earlier, Steffi. I mean that specifically to why kind of there is the alternative transportation matched up with the viaduct project is to check as many boxes in that grant to try to garner that grant, right? So if we can check all the boxes and answer everything that grant is asking for, then we think our potential to get the grant goes up, and that's why those two were paired together.
Are the city and county able to apply for grants collaboratively, or do you have to apply for grants separately as two different government entities?
Well, most of the time, if Eric identifies a grant and it's for a project out in the county and he wants city support, I mean, we support each other's grants with either recommendation letters or review of the grant documentation to say, hey, what do you think about this? Maybe we add this little piece to it. So
Gotcha.
we use each other to make sure that there's cooperation, coordination, and we look better.
Generally, it has to be one entity applying for it.
Gotcha.
Right.
Gotcha. Not like with a bid where you can have two different governments on the same bid. Gotcha.
Yeah, it's almost always one entity applying and the other supporting.
Gotcha.
And a lot of grants look for that collaboration, and so that's why you want to identify who your partners are.
Sure. Gotcha.
So all the way at the beginning of this conversation, you guys had mentioned the breakdown of the each of your sales taxes. And one resident emailed us to ask that since there is already a half-cent sales tax for parks and public safety in the city, and then I believe a sales tax that's directly for the Cole County jails, why does the capital improvement sales tax also go to those entities?
On the county side, so the jail tax, jail and law enforcement sales tax that was done 16, 17 years ago, it was a half-cent, and they bonded the jail and sheriff's office project. When that was paid off, it dropped down to, I think, a 3/8. And it was set up originally in the ballot language and everything that 3/8 would cover operations of the jail. Improvements to the facility beyond what that original sales tax paid for has to come from somewhere. Either it's general revenue or, if it is an improvement to the facility, it is the sales tax. So that's an example of why. So the original law enforcement sales tax was fund the jail. That was paid off. It was rolled back to the 3/8, and that was specifically for funding operations of that jail.
Right, and that comes from that 15% that's not going directly to road and bridge.
Yeah,
right?
that's that 15%, and that's again, the 85% that's under my direction as the public works director with the county oversight, the county commission oversight, but that 15% that's usually county commission oversight and other department directors, department heads, or elected heads in their departments. So
Sure.
they manage all that.
Falls under the discretion of the county commission, same as awarding most other projects or
Right.
expenditures would. Gotcha.
Right.
And obviously with Jefferson City, you have a specific percentage coming out for public safety.
Correct.
Are there any concerns with growing percentage of that tax going to public safety, with obviously some concerns around the pay raises that public safety firefighter and police department get in Jefferson City?
Any concerns on the
On a growing
that
percentage?
growing percentage.
Mhm.
I think that the percentage that we've had have been established for quite some time. I don't see that. There's no discussion of that.
Sure.
So no, that's nothing that we fear. And to that point, capital improvements, whether it be Parks and Recreation or for public safety, it's just the ability to be able to fund the level of service that our community has grown to expect in both those entities. So obviously you would have to ask both those directors or
Sure.
city administrators for specifics on those, but whether it be equipment that is needed for them, or whatever to support public safety or parks and recreations, it's vital for those programs as well.
Gotcha. Awesome. How much of a role does, obviously you guys just completed one of the larger cooperative projects in the city county history with Wildwood Drive. I know we've talked about Mission Drive extensions in the past, in past editions of the News Tribune. How much does that corridor play into your future plans? And obviously you said they can change. How much is building out that corridor in that area in general factor into your future plans and this renewal of the capital improvement tax?
Yeah, I think making sure that it's identified as a project that is important to us is key. We want to send signals out to everybody that yes, we look at that area as a potential growth area, but we also know that given trying to live within our means, that probably means that developers will have to kind of spur that growth in that area.
Sure.
So we want to identify and say, hey, we see this as a potential opportunity, and hopefully outside developers see that too. And then if there's that marriage, if you will, like at Wildwood, then hopefully that prompts that to happen versus just let's leave it off the paper and
Sure.
and not identify it. We want to say, hey, this is a potential growth area, and see if more growth in that area can happen.
Sure, gotcha.
I think it's important that we don't just think within the bounds of what we currently do and take care of. We need to be thinking long term. Where do we expand? Where does the city grow? There is a push to grow Jefferson City. The mayor said that. The county commissioners have said that. We want to grow our community. If you're not growing, you're dying. So how do we complement that through infrastructure and everything that brings? So we need to be thinking beyond just what we're doing. We need to have some vision, and Kyle and I and our staff together, those are things we collaborate on. And Mission Drive, that's one of those corridor type projects that is part of this project menu. An expansion of Militia Drive out on the east side of town. There's development there. We have CART, for example, the growth with that. You have the Ike Skelton National Guard Training Center. There's room for growth there.
Sure.
And so, an extension of Militia Drive to the south is an option, things we've been looking at. And then there's other corridors too that we, are ripe for growth. And as the city expands and annexes into different areas, we need to make sure that the county, we're doing things to complement that and
Gotcha.
working together.
You guys have often said that you trying to let development drive, what becomes a priority, at least out in those, more rural areas on the outskirts of city limits. Is that still kind of the plan going forward?
Yeah, pretty much. You've heard you build it, they will come.
Sure.
Sometimes they don't come.
Right.
So you can't be too much into that. But you also can't just be sitting here and say, hey, you do it all, we're not going to do anything.
Right.
There's a happy medium there, and we try to work together to, like I said earlier, identify where those areas are. And as developers start communicating with us, hey, you know, there's a desire to do this, this, or that, you know, making sure that we're not so reactive. We need to be proactive and ahead of the game. That way, when these things arise, we can respond to it and not say, oh, we don't know, not sure, don't have anything here, can't help you. You know, we don't want to be that.
Sure. And you know, in Jefferson City, there's excuse me, there's a lot to take care of that we already have, right? Mm-hmm. So, you know, there's we need to increase how much we take care of the system that we already have, but we also don't want to ignore those growth areas. We want to show that yes, we're available. You know, we're available to grow. Let that development lead it, because frankly, we have to. You know, to live within our means. So, you know, with that, it's identifying these are growth areas. You know, and trying to figure out if we can grow. That obviously grows the amount that this tax will collect. Right.
Right. More commerce, more sales tax. Right. Right.
So, you know, that's we increase the amount of sales tax of an existing tax. Then hopefully that helps us take care of our system a little bit better.
Kyle, I think it was last year we did one of those forums, City Coffees, and it seems like there was a question that came up during that why don't you go to a full cent? You know, why don't we just, we have a half cent that's been around for 40 years. Is it time to make it a full cent? My feeling on that, I'd say Kyle probably shares it. You know, I don't think we grow this tax by just raising taxes. You know, this has been, it hasn't changed. We're not increasing any taxes with this. It's in place just like it is and has been. You grow it by growing your tax base, bringing more people in. Right. And that's essentially what this does. I mean, you're expanding, you're improving, you're expanding, you know, growing what you can do and provide for, and it brings more people in. So that's how you increase your revenues, which you need to do if you're going to bring more people in. You got to provide more, you know, roads and take care of them, you know, different or better than what you were before. So
more services for more residents.
More services, yes.
Right. Awesome. Right. I think we've got time for one more question. If you want to do the honors, Steffi.
Yeah. So I know that both of you guys have. I know at least the city has a contingency kind of set aside for that. I guess can you explain what that means and why you have contingency on the sales tax?
Yes, I think contingency and is built in most projects that we do, especially with the escalating prices and you know, just inflation and how it's been. So. You know, that contingency kind of helps us conquer. This is what we think it's going to cost. But you know, in Wildwood's case, when was Wildwood first thought about?
Were you still in college at the time? 2007.
Here we go.
So
you were out, but yeah, it hung around for a long time. Yes.
So from 2007, you know, obviously to now, I mean, that's multiple tax cycles there, But you know, if we were to estimate during COVID time frame what a project costs, and then you know after 2020, 2021 time frame, you know how everything's kind of blown up, that contingency becomes very important, right? Because it's hard to keep. It was hard to keep up with inflation.
Yeah, I'd say contingencies are there just to make sure you got money to cover for some unforeseen, you know, circumstances that may arise throughout the course of a project or the course of a 10-year program like this. And we typically build contingencies into each project as we do them. And so, but on the flip side, you don't want to have so much money just sitting there. Right. You don't want to hoard it or save it.
Sure.
You know, we our goal is to get the money out into improvements that the community can use. So we don't want to build contingencies. We just want to keep a very modest reserve amount there in case we need it.
For sure. On a public works side, I mean, just drive our streets, right? We need to put more into our streets, and I know I've you know, a little over a year now with the city of Jefferson, and you know, born and raised in and just around the city of Jefferson and my whole life, and you know, I want our streets to be in better condition. That means we've got to use every dollar that we can to towards the streets and improving our streets and overlays and concrete repairs. And I know we're in my opinion pretty underfunded in that condition, but we are seeking I know our administration and mayor are been pretty active in trying to increase the dollars that we're able to put towards that. So yes, though we need those contingencies built in, making sure that those get spent where they need to be spent.
Gotcha. Awesome. Excellent. Well, I think that's about all the time we have left. Just a reminder, this will be on your municipal ballot April 7th, this Tuesday. You can also vote early at the Cole County Clerk's office the Saturday before the election, April 4th from 9 to 12. Thanks for joining us. This is Kyle and Eric and Steffi. Thanks for joining us. Yeah, of course. Yeah, and thanks for you for watching and reading. Awesome.